You'd expect gambling to begin in crowded cities, under torchlight, with coins clinking and crowds roaring. But the oldest evidence we have doesn't come from casinos or empires. It comes from cold, open grasslands, small bands of hunter-gatherers, thousands of years before cities even existed, quietly tossing objects into the dirt and waiting to see how they landed. That should feel wrong, because gambling, as we imagine it, needs wealth, risk, something to win or lose. Early humans had almost nothing. No currency, no markets, no stadiums, so why would they gamble at all? And more importantly, what exactly were they risking? The simple answer is that gambling started as entertainment, a way to pass time. But that explanation falls apart the moment you look closer. These weren't people with spare time in the modern sense. Survival was constant. Energy was precious. If they were doing something repeatedly, across thousands of years, it mattered. Which means the real question isn't when humans started gambling. It's why they needed randomness in the first place. The most intuitive place to start is with dice. Small, simple objects. Roll them, and you get a result. Today, that feels trivial. But creating something that produces random outcomes on purpose is not trivial at all. It means you understand unpredictability, and you're willing to trust it. For a long time, researchers believed dice emerged in early civilizations. Around 5,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, archaeologists found cube-shaped dice in places like Cataya, dating to roughly 2200 BCE. These look familiar: 6 sides, marked faces, almost identical to what we use today. It fit the story. As societies became complex, people invented games, betting, and probability. But that timeline has a problem, because older than these cubes are bones. Long before carved dice, humans were using astragali, ankle bones from sheep and goats. These bones don't land evenly. They have 4 distinct sides, each with different probabilities. When thrown, they produce outcomes that are unpredictable, but not entirely random. Ancient people noticed this, and they used it. Across the Middle East, Egypt, Greece, and beyond, these bones show up again and again, polished, collected, sometimes worn from repeated use. They were gaming pieces, but also something more, because in many cultures, throwing these bones wasn't just play. It was a way to ask questions, to seek answers, to interpret fate. And that's where the first crack appears, in the entertainment theory. If people believed outcomes were guided by something beyond them, spirits, gods, forces, then a throw wasn't just chance, it was meaning, a decision, a message. Which means early gambling might not have started as gambling at all. It might have started as communication. Now push the timeline even further back. In 2026, researcher Robert J. Madden published findings that forced archaeologists to rethink everything. Across sites in what is now Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico, his team documented hundreds of small, two-sided objects, what he called binary lots. They date back roughly 12,000 years, to the Folsom period. That's not civilization. That's deep prehistory. These weren't crude. They were deliberately shaped to land in one of 2 ways: yes or no, this or that. A controlled randomizer. Across 57 sites in 12 US states, Madden identified 659 of these sets. That's not a coincidence. That's a system. And here's the striking part. This predates the oldest known dice, from the Old World, by more than 6,000 years. So now the story changes again, because we're no longer talking about early farmers or city builders inventing games. We're talking about mobile hunter-gatherers, small groups that moved across landscapes, rarely encountering outsiders, and yet they were repeatedly creating tools for randomness. Why? Madden's interpretation is subtle, but powerful. He suggests these games of chance created neutral spaces, structured interactions, moments where outcomes weren't decided by strength, status, or dominance, but by rules everyone agreed on. Imagine 2 groups meeting after months apart. There's tension, uncertainty. Trade needs to happen. Alliances matter, but trust is fragile. Now introduce a game, a simple throw, a shared rule, an outcome neither side controls. Suddenly, decisions can be made without conflict, goods exchanged, disputes settled, not by force, but by chance. In that context, gambling isn't wasteful. It's efficient. It's social technology, and it only works if everyone believes in it. Which brings us back to belief. Because across ancient cultures, randomness was rarely seen as random. In Egypt, games like Senet used throwing sticks to determine movement, but those throws weren't just mechanics. They were interpreted as the will of the gods. The god Thoth was even credited, in myth, with inventing games themselves. In Mesopotamia, the royal game of dating to around 2600 BCE, wasn't just played, it was wagered on. Cuneiform tablets describe outcomes and bets, one of the earliest clear records of gambling as we'd recognize it. But again, it's tied to something deeper: fate. Fortune. Forces beyond human control. In Greece, people used astragaloi not just casually, but seriously enough that specialized stalls sold polished sets. There's even a myth that the hero Palamedes invented dice during the Trojan War to entertain restless soldiers. Whether that's true or not, it tells us something important. By then, gambling was embedded in culture. And then come the Romans. If any ancient society treated gambling like a sport, it was Rome. They had multiple types of dice. Tesseras, six-sided cubes. Tali, knucklebone-style pieces. They bet on outcomes constantly. Dice games, gladiator fights, and most tellingly, chariot races. Crowds gathered. Money changed hands. Outcomes were uncertain. It's not hard to see the parallel to modern sports betting, whether it's football finals or global tournaments. And just like today, they cheated. Loaded dice have been found in Pompeii, carefully weighted to favor certain outcomes. Proof that once you introduce chance, people will try to control it. Roman law technically restricted gambling, except during Saturnalia, a festival where normal rules were suspended. But like most gambling restrictions throughout history, it was widely ignored. Even emperors were involved. Augustus and Claudius were known gamblers. Claudius reportedly even wrote a book on dice, now lost. So by this point, gambling looks familiar. Structured games, clear bets, winnings and losses. But if you trace it all the way back, it doesn't start there. It starts with something quieter. A throw, a question, an uncertain outcome. So when did ancient humans start gambling? Based on what researchers currently believe, the earliest known evidence points to around 12,000 years ago, with those binary lots in North America. But even that might not be the true beginning. Organic materials don't always survive. Simpler forms of chance, stones, sticks, bones, could have been used long before that, leaving no trace. What we can say is this: humans have been deliberately creating randomness for a very long time, and they didn't do it just for fun. They did it to decide, to connect, to negotiate uncertainty in a world that offered very little control. Today, when billions watch a ball cross a field and millions place bets on what happens next, it feels like entertainment layered on top of competition. But underneath that is something much older, a shared agreement to let chance speak. Because for most of human history, randomness wasn't the opposite of control. It was the only fair way to have it. And that means gambling didn't begin when we had something to lose. It began when we needed a way to decide without fighting.